Just how hard is it to buy a home in California? Well, it's hard, really hard, both compared to how difficult it is in other states and how challenging it was for previous generations of Californians. In the late 1960s, the average California home cost about 3 times the average household income. Today, it costs more than 7 times that average household income. While it's always been more expensive to be a homeowner in California, the gap with the rest of the country has grown into a chasm. The median California home is priced nearly 2.5 times higher than the median national home. The pandemic hasn't cooled the housing market either. Demand has long exceeded supply of homes for California, and that's especially true now. But while many families are suffering the economic impact of the pandemic, wealthier households with money to spend and capitalizing on low interest rates have driven up prices even more. In September 2020, California's median home price reached $712,000, a historic high. So who owns their home? Despite relatively low mortgage rates, however, exploding house prices have caused California's overall homeownership rate to dip significantly. Just more than half of the state's households own their home, the third lowest rate in the country with the lowest rates within the state since World War II. And those households skew significantly white. White Californians are twice as likely as Black Californians to own their home. The racial gap in homeownership has widened over the years, which also means Black Californians are less likely to build wealth over time. But racial disparities are true in all dimensions of housing. Blacks and Hispanics are more likely to be cost-burdened, more likely to live in overcrowded conditions, more at risk of eviction and displacement. And that's why wages can't keep up with rental costs. Median earnings for Californians are higher than the national average, and are significantly higher in certain regions like the Bay Area. On average, income over the past 2 decades has not kept pace with escalating rents. Before the pandemic, about half of California renters were rent-burdened, which means that more than 30% of their income went towards rent. The numbers are worse for families of color. In 2019, Black renters were about twice as likely as white renters to be severely cost-burdened. The pandemic only worsened these numbers, and unemployment skyrocketed and families lost wages. Roughly 1 out of every 6 tenants fell behind on rent payments. The extremes of California's housing crisis are concentrated in the Bay Area and greater Los Angeles, but the challenge is statewide. While San Diego, San Francisco, and LA top the list of toughest rental markets in the country, cities including Sacramento and Fresno recently have experienced the largest year-over-year rent increases. In most Central Valley cities, the majority of very low-income families are spending more than 30% of their paycheck on rent. And of course, that means homelessness is on the rise. The number of people experiencing homelessness is notoriously hard to track, but estimates are getting more accurate and show that the problem is big and worsening. About 160,000 homeless were single adults and nearly 85,000 in families with kids. LA County has the highest number of people experiencing homelessness, with about 90,000 people who accessed services in 2020. According to the state, nearly 40% of these people, or 91,000 individuals, moved into permanent housing last year, which could mean anything from moving back in from a family member to getting their own place. This overlaps with an unprecedented amount of funding going to fix the issue, $13 billion over the last 3 years. Unfortunately, the housing crisis has major repercussions for the economy. Big business is also feeling the pinch of California's housing crisis. The McKinsey Global Institute found that housing shortage costs the economy between $143 billion and $233 billion annually, not taking into account second-order costs to health, education, and the environment. Much of that is due to households spending too much of their income on the rent or mortgage and not enough on consumer goods. Even the attractive salaries and lavish perks of Silicon Valley struggles to overcome the local housing market, as young tech talent flees to the relatively expensive climates of Austin or Portland. Nearly 60% of Los Angeles companies in a recent USC study found that the region's high cost of living was affecting employee retention. California just doesn't have enough housing to keep up with demand. Over the past 10 years, California's population grew by about 6.7%, while new housing grew by only 4.8%. Population growth has slowed down significantly. In 2019, the state for the first time added more housing units than people, but the picture might be less rosy than the numbers suggest. A lot of people are still coming to California, but many of those leaving are likely being priced out, and I'm pretty sure housing is a major factor. In most of the state's major urban areas, the bulk of a single-family house's price is locked into the land it sits on. That high price tag on the cost of actually building a parcel and prepping it for construction not only makes new housing more expensive, it influences what kind of housing gets produced. Developers prioritize high-end projects, since even the cheapest prefab unit will come stuck with a steep fixed cost. So what makes land expensive when it's in its shortest supply? Take San Francisco, 7 by 7 miles of hillside penned in by water on 3 sides. Of the top 15 most physically constrained metro areas in the country, 7 dot California's oh-so-desirable coast, but many of those coveted locales place additional limits on where and when and how much construction can take place. That all makes it that much harder for housing to keep up with population growth, and over the last decade, it has not. So what are your thoughts? Is the housing crisis really that bad in California? Comment below. And as always, take care of your money.